Good afternoon and welcome to this virtual licensing committee of Allerdale Borough Council. My name's Lee, I'm the Democratic Services Officer, and for the purposes of this meeting, I'm also the host. I won't have any control over the meeting, and the meeting won't begin until instructed by the chair. The meeting is being live streamed on YouTube and recording will be made available afterwards. Before we go on to the meeting, we'll do some introductions, starting with the members. Councillor Bainbridge.
Yeah, good afternoon, Councillor Mary Bainbridge.
Councillor Daniels.
Good afternoon, Councillor Alan Daniels.
Councillor Horsley.
Good afternoon, Councillor Daniel Horsley.
Councillor Kirkbride.
Good afternoon, Councillor Adrian Kirkbride.
Councillor Lynch.
Good afternoon, Councillor Elaine Lynch.
Councillor Munby. Councillor Munby, you may have been on mute. It's okay, we'll come back around to you. Councillor Smith.
Good afternoon, Councillor Alan Smith.
Councillor Tyson.
Good afternoon, Councillor Alan Tyson.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Good afternoon, Councillor Wilkinson.
And Councillor Munby.
You're right, I was on mute. Hello.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to the officers. Jill Morgan.
Good afternoon, Jill Morgan, Legal and Licensing Manager.
Gillian Collinson.
Good afternoon, Gillian Collinson, Senior Licensing and Compliance Officer.
Thanks very much for your introductions. Members, just remind us to stay on mute, and if you want to speak, please use the raise hand function. So now I'll hand you over to the chair to start the meeting. Thank you.
Good afternoon, members. You have the details in front of you. And you see the first item in the minutes, 3 to 34, and also to sign as a correct record the minutes of the following meetings. Now, the meetings were held, as you can see, on the 26th of February, 30th of September, 14th of August, 27th of August, September 20, 3rd of October 20, 11th of November. Would somebody move them, please? Councillor Daniels moving. Will you secondly?
Yeah, I'll second those.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Oh yeah, thanks, Alan.
Yeah, and if they're all agreed, Chair, if no one uses a raised hand, we can agree them and go on to the next item.
Okay. Apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies received today from Councillors Gaston, Granger, Kendall, Williams, Bell, Stoddart. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Declarations of interest, if any. There are none. Questions from the public?
None received, Chair.
None received, okay. We move on to item 5 in the frequency of vehicle testing, which is on page 35 to 44. And now I'll hand over to officers. And this is Jill. If I can...
It'll be myself, Chair.
There you are.
Thank you, Chair.
This
is a report regarding an amendment to the vehicle age policy covering hackney carriage and private hire vehicles. The recommendations there at paragraph 2, and it's made up of 4 parts, and it's to agree to amend the vehicle age policy by removing the requirement for a report to be carried out by an engineer for vehicles aged 4 years and over, to increase the number of vehicle tests for vehicles aged 4 years and over from twice per year to 3 times per year, and to replace the following wording, which is in clause 4 of the existing vehicle age policy. Lee, if it's possible to put the vehicle age policy up, it might be easier. Thank you.
Yeah, just give me a moment and I'll do that.
Thank you. That's it. If you go on to the next page, it's got the actual word in there. Yeah, point 4. So what we're asking for there is for that wording to be amended. The current wording relates to vehicles having a 6-month test when the vehicle's over 4 years of age, and what is being proposed is that vehicles over 4 years of age have a test 3 times per year. So the wording proposed is contained in paragraph 2.1.3. And the 4th part of the recommendation is to approve delegated powers for the suspension or revocation of vehicle licenses for failure to undertake or pass those required tests. And that power is to be given to the legal and licensing manager, the senior licensing and compliance officer, and the licensing and compliance officer. The background to the report is that the council is the licensing authority for hackney carriages and private hire vehicles. The authority sets the licensing conditions that must be complied with for a licence to be granted, and the conditions include the age at which a vehicle can be presented for first-time licensing, and once licensed, the frequency at which it must be presented for test. For routine testing in the legislation, this can be up to a maximum of 3 times a year. As part of our licensing regime, the vehicles are tested to ensure they meet the standards required by Allerdale Borough Council. The Council's vehicle age policy was last revised on the 20th of March 2019, and the purpose of that policy is to ensure that all hackneys and private hire vehicles operating in the borough are in exceptional condition and remain safe for the use of the general public. It contains 2 main stipulations: that no vehicle will be licensed as a hackney or private hire if it is 4 years of age or older at first date of application. And once licensed, the vehicle can continue to be licensed beyond the age of 4 years, providing it complies with a number of conditions. One of those conditions is the vehicle has undergone an independent engineer's AA or RAC inspection at the applicant's own cost, who must submit the report to the council. A number of requirements are also laid out as to the criteria the engineer must fulfil in terms of experience and qualifications. The vehicle age policy, as it stands at the moment, is attached in that appendix, which refers to the 6-monthly test. On the production of an engineer's report, any observation that the engineer makes must be rectified prior to the usual taxi test conducted by the council's contractor. They will check those items in addition to the usual test, and the test also checks that the vehicle is to MOT standard. Historically, the trade have generally used the same engineer who is based in Carlisle, but others travel out of county to the RAC or AA if they are members of those organisations. COVID-19 had a big impact on the supply and provision of engineers' reports. On the 1st of April 2020, the acting chief executive supported a proposal to defer the requirement for an engineer's report for 6 months following the expiry of the licence, together with the penalty of suspension for non-compliance. The reason being the local engineer could not carry out the inspections due to health reasons. In addition to that, restrictions were in place regarding non-essential travel. Therefore, the other organisations based out of county who would otherwise do the engineer's inspections advised that they were only doing emergency breakdown work. Therefore, they were unable to carry out the inspections or produce reports. As there appeared to be no other engineer availability, with the engineer's report being mandatory, it would have resulted in non-compliance with the policy and the inability to renew the vehicle licences. Since then, the local engineer has retired, and although some organisations have resumed reports, the availability depends on whether an individual is a member of that organisation, and it would mean them having to travel out of county to obtain a report. Consequently, a proposal was made to extend the deferral of the requirement to obtain an engineer's report until the end of the current taxi test contract. This was approved by the Acting Chief Executive in November 2020, and the extension was proposed for the following reasons: that the tender for the vehicle testing station to contract to test hackneys and private hire vehicles, is currently advertised, and the current contract expires on the 31st of January 2021. Previously, a consultation document had been circulated to the vehicle proprietors asking for views on current testing facilities, what works well, what improvements or changes they would like to see. And they had previously expressed that the requirement for an engineer's report be reviewed. Due to the Department for Transport issuing statutory guidance for taxi and private hire vehicle standards, we are now reviewing all our taxi policies in line with those standards. The legislation prohibits the council from appointing a testing station outside the borough. Therefore, it could be seen as unreasonable to expect licence holders to travel outside the county to obtain an engineer's report, with alternatives being considered as substitutes for having the additional engineer's report, such as increasing the frequency of testing up to a maximum of 3 times a year. During COVID, renewals of vehicle licence continued to be processed. The testing station operated right through, and evidence of service maintenance is also required, and those documents were checked and verified as accurate and sufficient. With the licenses being renewed as usual by customer services. And that was the reason why the extension was granted to defer the engineer's report. Since the extension was granted, an options appraisal has been completed regarding ongoing taxi testing services, and a report has been prepared and has since been considered by executive, recommending the direct award of the taxi testing contract to Allerdale Waste Services Limited, and that has been approved. The contract with the current provider that was due to expire on the 31st of January was extended to the 31st of May, so the new provider will take over on the 1st of June. Due to the practical difficulties regarding the engineers' reports, specifically the lack of availability of engineers locally, we are now asking the Licensing Committee to consider removing the requirement for a report for vehicles aged 4 years and over. Instead, we are asking for the committee to replace the requirement for an engineer's report for vehicles aged 4 years and over with the requirement for an additional vehicle test, which would mean that those vehicles would be tested 3 times per year. And it is proposed that this change will come into place from the 1st of June 2021, and that would be in line with the new contract starting. The wording for the proposed amendment to the vehicle age policy is outlined in paragraph 2.1.2, which is under the recommendations. The remainder of the vehicle age policy conditions would continue to apply, i.e. the requirements around service history and proof of evidence of service maintenance. The proposed changes should promote the public safety objective and increase safety standards due to the change in the frequency of testing. Under the current regime, the engineer's report, service history check, taxi test and MOT are all done at the same time. But if these recommendations are approved, the checks will take place 3 times a year. The taxi test is valid for a period of 28 days. And that is the reason in the amended wording why we would not accept a taxi test to be undertaken more than 28 days in advance of the due date. And the additional delegation is being requested regarding suspension and revocation of vehicle licenses for failure to undertake or pass the required tests, and that is for the 3 officers named in the report. And that is the conclusion to the report, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members regarding the report? If there are, can you please show a hand?
Councillor Lynch, Chair.
Everybody's satisfied with that then?
Sir, Chair, Councillor Lynch.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Lynch. Yeah, you are. I found you now. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask the replacement of doing the checks 3 times a year rather than 2, and that would replace an engineer's report. Is that quite common in other council areas?
It is, councillor, yes. It's, in fact, we were quite unusual in asking for an engineer's report. You would find that in most other authorities, the test would be more frequent rather than asking for a report from another engineer.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Chair, Councillor Wilkinson.
Yeah.
Oh, you're there, right. Okay.
Yeah. Gillian.
Yes.
With regards to costings, there was a price on the engineer's report. I'm trying to get a compatibility in between whether it's going to incur more charges towards a taxi proprietor or whether it's going to run out roughly the same.
It will work out at slightly less.
Thank you.
Further questions?
It doesn't appear to be any further questions, Chair.
Thank you very much. In that case, we accept the report fully. Are we agreed? Mr. Nod will do, a hand will do, yes, yes. All agreed, thank you. Okay, moving on. Next item is item 6. And this is Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Vehicles screens, pages 45 to 56, which you've either got in paper form or the normal form. And Julian going to take us through this.
Thank you, Chair. Lee, I think if you bring up the draft screen policy, that will be useful. Thank you. Thanks, Lee. Okay, Chair, the reason for the report is that several requests have been received from the trade regarding the installation of partition screens in Hackney's private hire vehicles to protect licensed drivers during the COVID-19 pandemic. The recommendation is that the policy before you is approved with immediate effect. The background to the report is that the COVID-19 pandemic has affected the livelihoods of Hackney Carriage and private hire licence holders significantly. In order to assist the trade's recovery, it's proposed that a draft policy be approved regarding the installation of partition screens in licensed vehicles. The decision on whether to use a screen rests with the local licensing authority and drivers, operators and owners of Hackneys and private hire vehicles. The Department of Transport has issued guidance now and states that where a licensing authority decides to specify requirements in respect of screens, they are encouraged to consider its guidance in developing their own licensing requirements for the fitment of interior screens to prevent the spread of, or to help prevent the spread of coronavirus. And the copy of the draft policy is there in front of you. As outlined in the draft policy, the authority recognises that partition screens do not provide 100% protection, but recognises that there is evidence to suggest this type of physical barrier can reduce the rate of transmission. The purpose of the policy is to provide drivers with physical protection against the transmission of COVID-19 in their workplace, to provide protection for passengers, and more generally to provide public confidence and assurance. We would ask that the installation of screens, we could ask for the installation of screens to be mandatory or discretionary, or we could choose not to have a policy at all. However, it's recommended that a policy be produced and introduced, and that the installation of partition screens be discretionary, particularly in light of the guidance issued by the Department of Transport. The guidance was issued on the 3rd of March 2021 and provides advice for drivers, operators and owners of hackneys and private hires who choose to fit a screen or barrier to their vehicle to reduce the spread of COVID-19. The Local Government Association has also issued guidance. There are various reasons why the installation of partition screens should not be a mandatory condition. And those are that not all licensed vehicles do the same work, and in some cases a screen would be detrimental. For example, if businesses were doing airport transfers. Some insurance providers may not allow a partition screen to be installed. Some drivers may prefer to use other means of sanitation, such as PPE and regular cleaning. The design of some vehicles mean that safety and other features, example side impact airbags, air conditioning and sunroofs, will be affected detrimentally by partition screens. And also many licensed vehicles are used as the main family vehicle, and partition screens would not be appropriate for this. Officers recognise that a discretionary policy will mean that screens are installed in some vehicles, and whilst in principle issue, it does mean that some passengers will prefer to travel in a vehicle which does have a partition screen. Private hire vehicles are pre-booked, and therefore a passenger can request a vehicle which is installed with a partition screen. We do not stipulate a requirement for passengers to choose the first vehicle on a taxi rank, and therefore they are fully entitled to exercise their right of choice and travel in a vehicle which has a protective screen. The installation and maintenance of any partition or safety screen will remain the sole responsibility of the vehicle owner or driver and/or the operator, subject to contractual arrangements between the parties. The council will not accept liability in circumstances where a screen causes injury to a passenger or driver. If we now look at the draft policy, I can take you through that. The main points of it. So the introduction there is basically what I've just gone through, to say that it wouldn't be mandatory, etc. The specification near the bottom of the first page lays out the legislation that it must comply with, that it must be made of suitable materials. It should be chosen for the individual vehicle, because vehicle designs and specifications vary, and wherever possible, a screen offered or approved by the vehicle manufacturer should be chosen to help ensure its suitability for the vehicle. The screen should not be significantly changed or modified from the original manufactured design, and where it is necessary to modify the original design, assurances should be sought from the supplier or installer that the modification does not raise any concerns. It must be transparent and not interfere with the driver's vision or cause excessive reflection or distortion in the mirror or onto the windscreen, and it should be regularly monitored for wear and tear. It must not impede the driver's movement, and it must not impede the driver or passenger access or egress, must not cause a trip hazard. It must not interfere with vehicle safety systems, and it must not interfere with other vehicle safety systems, example seat belts, fixing points, head restraints, etc. It must not adversely influence or interfere in any way with vehicle type approval, must not be fitted in a way that affects the structural integrity of the vehicle, must not have sharp edges or protrusions that cause injury, must be made of materials that do not have sharp edges if they break. They should not be attached using Velcro, and there should be a minimal gap between the screen and the sides of the vehicle. should be easy to clean, should not be made of toxic or flammable materials, and it must not wrap around the driver's seat to create a partition between the two front seats. Fitting the screen, it can be fitted by a variety of providers, including the vehicle manufacturer dealerships, specialist screen installers, or the driver operator or proprietor if they have the skills and equipment to do so safely. And they must be installed in accordance with the Department for Transport guidance. Regarding communication with passengers, it's important that the driver can talk to the passengers when the screen's fitted, and to take into consideration those things laid out before you. Insurance, prior to fitting a screen, it's important that they consider the following. The insurance provider should be informed, because failure to do so would invalidate the insurance policy. The screen must not affect the ability of the vehicle to be properly insured for the purpose of carrying persons for hire and reward. The Association of British Insurers encourages drivers and operators to seek guidance from their insurer to ensure compliance with the terms of their insurance, and the insurance provider should be asked whether following a collision, screen repairs or a replacement screen would be included in the insurance cover. When a screen has been fitted, there are 4 points there that should be taken into consideration. And that's regarding ongoing maintenance, being regularly checked for cracks, deterioration and security, follow the relevant guidance in respect of cleaning the screen, and if the screen has an opening for payment, it should be closed or sealed during normal driving and only open during the payment process. It is intended to have an approval procedure and for permission to be sought from the licensing authority before a screen is installed. Asking for information regarding technical specification, written confirmation that any partition or screen installed has been done so professionally and in accordance with manufacturer's requirements and specifications, written confirmation that the vehicle's insurance cover has not been affected by the installation of the partition or screen, and written confirmation from the vehicle's manufacturer that the installation of the partition or screen does not compromise the integrity of the vehicle structure. We've also inserted there as Appendix 1 the approval form, which is what the applicant will need to complete. And as you can see there, they will have to sign the declarations 1 to 5. And that is the conclusion of the report, Chair.
Thank you very much, Julian. Are there any questions to report? And obviously the new aspect to it is the screen. Apologies for my phone going off. Yes, the installation of screens. Are we all agreed on the following?
Chair, Councillor Wilkinson wishes to ask a question.
All right.
Yeah.
You're on, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I can see a can of worms here. Purposefully built taxis already come with screens inside them. I can see a problem with insurance. On the materials that's used, you're now going to put some kind of material inside a vehicle where there's airbags that protect people in case of a crash. And now you're talking about putting something in there that could possibly have shards flying about inside a cab if there is a crash. I don't even think this can be implemented, because the amount of multiple makes of vehicles that's on the taxi rank that's running as taxis now, I don't think manufacturers built them to be as taxis, but purposefully built taxis are built to be taxis. And I think this is just inoperable.
Answer, Julian.
Well, that is the reason why we've put in the aspect of the vehicle manufacturer Obviously, they'll be able to advise on the most appropriate screen for the different types of vehicles. I know certainly last year we were asked a lot by the trade if they could, insert screens, etc. So it's something that they do want, but obviously we need to consider the safest way of doing that, because last year certainly there weren't a lot of screens around on the market, and I think manufacturers were kind of scrabbling to try and make something, but and there was nothing really that we could approve as such. So that's why we thought the safest way is that the vehicle manufacturer and the insurance company both sanction the screen that the applicant would like, and that would need to be in line with the conditions that we've said there about not affecting any of the safety features that are already installed in that vehicle.
Are you stating that this is going to be an optional policy? It's not mandatory?
It is optional, yes. We've put some reasons in there as to why it should be optional, which I did go through, and you can find those at paragraph 4.4 in the report. So some drivers won't want a screen. That's why we don't want to make it mandatory. Some safety features would be affected. Some insurance companies may not allow it in the first place. Some drivers do use the licensed vehicles as family vehicles, and depending on the type of business that the operator does, a screen may not be practical for those purposes. So that's why it's not a mandatory condition that's being asked for.
Thank you very much on that, Jill.
Chair, Councillor Lynch is next.
Thank you, Chair. Two things. The policy, I presume that is based on a sort of a government policy, and other councils and things have adapted the same sort of policy, and that you in where you said fitting the screen, there is government guidance on this. So clearly the Department of Transport have sort of sanctioned that this is an acceptable thing to do. From what
yes,
you put there.
Yes, Councillor. They have just issued that guidance in March, which is what, as of the LGA, which is how we've based the points that we have in the report.
And secondly, will this incur a charge? Will there be a charge like there is for other things, like the testing and things like that? Will an operator have to pay a charge to have the screen in there or not?
They'll have to pay whoever manufactures the screen, but they won't need to pay us to get permission.
Right, that's yeah. So they're not going to be paying the council to get permission to do it.
No.
Right, thank you.
Chair, it appears that all the questions, there's no further questions, unless anyone wants to state now. You may be on mute, Chair. Still can't hear you, Chair.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Julian, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
are we saying this is a recommendation to the council through the licensing committee? We're not
No.
saying it's mandatory, are we?
It's not a mandatory condition that's been recommended,
That's right.
but the policy itself is a recommendation to the licensing committee.
Right, okay.
So once the
okay.
committee make the decision, if they approve it, it's with immediate effect. It doesn't need to go to council for further approval.
Yes, yeah. Any more comments, please? You have to wave your hand vigorously for me to see it. There are none.
Doesn't appear so, Chair.
Okay, so we are agreeing then to accept this recommendation.
I move, Chair, that we agree to accept it.
Thank you. Seconded. Councillor Daniels.
Yeah, and
Yes.
if everyone's the absence of any comments or raised hands would suggest that everyone's in approval, Chair.
Yeah, well, Councillor Daniels seconded it then. Yeah. Okay. The last item on here is the Licensing Committee procedures, and I'd like to ask Gillian, are there any changes on pages 57 to 60?
No, there aren't. That's just the standard procedure that's attached to the agenda.
It's the standard one. Yeah, we all know anyway.
Yeah, no need
Oh.
for any changes.
Okay. So there are no more questions? None?
No, Chair.
Everybody's happy? Okay. I've got papers everywhere here, Lee.
I was going to say, Chair, that's the last item, so it's over to you to close the meeting.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for attending, members. Thank you to the officers for the report.